while we're all forever rating this new balanced data slate if it ever comes, I decided to come up with the list of the worst things about Warhammer 40k right now because these things need actually addressing. And a lot of these things are going to be things that I agree with, and some of them are going to be things that I definitely don't agree with. But this is largely, as a whole, what the community has responded with are the most frustrating things about Warhammer 40,000 right now. So why the hell talk about this? Well, the reality is 40k is bigger than ever, and people are always going to find something to moan about. And so this is just the big part of it. And so I really want to provide solutions and answers to some of these problems because that is what's going to keep our game healthy and alive and continue growing. For those of you who don't know, one of my main missions is to help obviously support the increased play level of the average player, and I think we've actually done that quite well. I've been able to see from DMs and from comments on the YouTube channel, just people are performing much better on average, which is really, really cool to see. Uh, but I want to see where 40k can actually make the next leap. So that's where one of my goals are. So let's talk about some of the problems in the game right now and how we can actually address it. So number one, and this is the one that a lot of people really bring up with, and very, very few people who are competitive bring up. So community, toxicity, and elitism. Now this is something that will absolutely plague basically every single hobby in the entire game. You're always going to have some form of toxicity and elitism whenever you get into like a more of a competitive aspect, whether you're playing golf, whether you're playing basketball, whether you're playing any TCG, or if you're playing Warhammer. Once you bring more competitive into it, there's going to be things that pop up. There's a thing called gray shaming and painting criticism. Actually, this is one that I've experienced where people actually kind of talk down to me because my models aren't pretty. Because I don't like painting. It's not fun for me. I actually don't get approximately zero joy out of painting and building my models. So I've had people like literally talk crap to me at a tournament because of the way my models look. That's pretty annoying. Now me, whatever. I'm fine. I brush it off. I thrive on confrontation. Totally fine for me. But for some people who don't really like confrontation or maybe don't quite have this thick skin, that can be a really big issue. So if you're one of these people who are like a hobbyist elitist, you're the problem, not the person with the lesser painted army. All right. Gatekeeping toward casual players and kids. Now, this is something that I can actually get behind. Sometimes, and I will totally agree, when you're leading towards like more competitive level play, it can seem like, well, I'm not good enough to compete at that, or it's the kids can't really compete there. And this is why you have different types of leagues, right? There are different types of competitive play. If I am going to be playing at a golden ticket event, I'm not saying this is exactly the way it is, but this is the way it should be. If I'm playing at a golden ticket event or a higher level skill level tournament, I'm going to be playing differently than I might at a local RTT. So there are different levels of competition, and they should be a little bit more open to different people. Now, I will hear that some like really, 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 really casual players get frustrated at some of the more popular tournaments because they can't have fun, because they can't perform well with the armies they want to bring. But the reality is you are actually going into a highly competitive event. So if you want to bring just a fun list, dude, it's not going to be fun. Like, you should bring your more fun list at maybe a slightly less competitive event, whether that's a weekend RTT, or a GT that's focused on more competitive or on more casual play. That's totally fine. And by the way, if you want to bring your super casual list to a tournament that is highly competitive and have fun, awesome, dude. Have a blast. Just don't expect to perform well. And as long as you're not expected to perform well, you will have a good time. So there, I can definitely understand why there might be a little bit of a feeling of there's some gatekeeping at some of these more competitive events. But you got to understand, dude, if you're going to play in the Masters of Golf, yeah, dude, they're gatekeeping. This is not a place for amateurs. If you're playing in the NBA, yeah, they're gatekeeping. This is not a place for guys to get a pickup game on the weekend. Like, so different levels of competitive play by nature have to gatekeep a little bit. And I understand that. I don't think that's a problem. I do think it's a problem when it's happening at some like these lower level tournaments, which honestly I haven't really seen, but I have heard on Reddit that it happens. So if it happens, I would condemn that, but I don't really see it happening. Rising elitism in general as 40k gets more competitive. Now, I didn't really understand what this meant. I went on Reddit and I scoured Reddit. I was on it reading about all these horribly elite competitive players who are just down talking everyone who doesn't know all the rules perfectly. And I've literally never played a single one of these people, and I've played a lot of tournament games. Now, I've had bad experiences, right? Like I've experienced people cheating twice. And I've experienced just like I've been very vocal about some of the times when I had these experiences, and I've had an experience with people who are just, they suck all the joy out of life. Now that definitely happens. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but you're gonna have your run of the mill like kind of bad eggs in literally any hobby or any I don't know, not even hobby, just like life scenario that you're ever going to run into. So this is not really a specific criticism towards 40K. As a matter of fact, I will say that basically every single tournament I've ever gone to has been a total blast, and I've had a net positive out of every single one of them. Even the ones which are very few and far in between where I had a bad game. So like, and I'm not talking about bad play, I mean like bad friction with an opponent. I've had more than one bad game in tournaments. Trust me. So yeah, I guess you're gonna get more tryhards. This can totally happen. I'm not having. I certainly wouldn't dismiss that. But I would also say that the majority of times where I have seen people like have problems at competitive events is really more of your casual players who don't actually know the rules, and they get upset because well, they didn't understand the rules of the game. So this goes both ways, guys. Yes, there might be elitism, but there's also a certain like amount of responsibility that, yeah, you got to know the rules if you want to play at a certain level of competition. Sorry. And then it could just create an unfriendly and unwelcoming environment. I have basically never experienced this. Every single tournament I've ever been to, regardless of country, regardless of level of tournament, has always been very welcoming and very friendly. That doesn't mean every single human being has been friendly, but you can't legislate people to not be jerks. That's just never going to happen. So, is there some elitism that's growing in Warhammer 40K? Probably, but personally, I believe that's going to be natively based around the idea that there has to be, as there is a higher level of competition. So, that's going to be the first complaint. I'd like to hear your thoughts down below. But like, I don't really want to hear it if you're like, oh, I had one bad experience ever. It's like, okay, yeah, everyone's had a bad experience. Anyway, the esportsification of 40K, this kind of go hands in hand. Game design has increasingly been tuned for tournaments. Now, this is actually a very, very interesting concept. Yeah, guys, 40K is more competitive than it's ever been. You've got balanced athletes, you've got GT packs, you've got live streams. It is kind of creeping towards a bit of an esports feel. I would not debate that. Narrative players and hobbyists are starting to feel a little bit left behind because there seems to be less focus on storytelling and more focus on the actual gameplay. And I do believe that this is almost strictly due to the advent of social media, because what's more interesting on social media? It's going to be people who are into the actual like hardcore, let's play the sport of the game. It's just the way it is. I don't think that's anything that is innate in the game, but when you see social media, you see my channel, you see Art of War channels, you see anyone's channel, all the channels that talk about actually playing the game are all going to be into how to do the game better, because that's just what people are interested in. Now, you'll see like certain channels like Play on Tabletop, which is way bigger than any of us, and they definitely cater towards a more casual narrative focus, and that's totally okay as well. So, but they're not really talking about the game. They're just playing a game, which is cool. So as you see, I mean, that channel, Play on Tabletop Tactics, I think those guys are like 30 times the size of me and at least like 10 times the size of Art of War. So the idea that it's all competitive is just not true. But social media can, I understand, push the idea that everything is about competitive. Now, some people who are more into the storytelling part of the game or the narrative part of the game feel like they are risking losing the soul of the game as we move more towards this esportsification, which is a word, darn it. And I don't necessarily agree with that, but I would recognize, and this is totally to be fair, it's not that competitive play exists, that's the issue. It's that sometimes GW seems like they're ignoring narrative players. And I will definitely say that we are getting less narrative stuff in 10th edition than we did in 9th edition and 8th edition. We had more of the narrative player packs coming out with more of the story that was driven. So I will say this is probably a fairly valid concern that GW isn't paying as much attention to the narrative or the casual side of the game. I think that's just the nature of the beast. As the game grows, you need more like focus on the rules and on the balance. And sometimes some of these things get, I don't know, pushed to the wayside. So if I could encourage GW, I would say maybe a little bit more paying attention to some of the narrative aspects of the game is definitely viable. But that's just not going to be what's pushed into your face on social media. It just won't be. So I'm not sure how to balance that, but I do recognize that idea. So basically, here's the deal. Here's the balance. It's okay to have both sweaty tournaments and casual crusade leagues. Both should totally thrive. So if you enjoy the casual side of the game, I definitely please have a blast with it. But you got to understand that a lot of us literally can't play like narrative casual games, because the second I play like a crusade game, dude, I will min-max my crusade game, and then it will not be fun for people because I'm going to min-max everything. It's my nature. It's who I am. So yeah, there needs to be a position for people to be able to min-max play competitively. So there we have it. All right, let's go on into the next thing that people are really complaining about. Legacy models becoming obsolete. This is one that I think people have a huge amount of what's the word I'm looking for? Where I think people have a valid problem with it. Listen, guys, nobody likes feeling like their army is useless because of the rules have dropped off. It's just I totally get that. But the game does have to evolve, and you cannot expect 20-year-old sculpts to stay front and center forever. At a certain point, GW does need to say, hey, listen, we're not supporting this model anymore. We're backing off. I would definitely agree that 10th edition did this in a very poor way. They had sweeping changes early on in the edition where I think out of the Forge World and Space Marines line, they lost something like 20 data sheets in a day. I know the Orcs lost something like 12 data sheets in a day. So this hit a bunch of the different factions, and I definitely can understand why people got salty when they lose their Grot tanks, their Grot Mega Tank, their Knobs on War Bikes, and their Mecha Dread, and their Mega Dread, and all of these things all at once, and the Kill Tank. So I do understand the idea that, hey, that was probably not cool. But from a business perspective, I'm not really sure how GW really balances the idea of, well, sometimes we got to phase stuff out and sometimes we got to put new stuff in. So maybe they could have done it in like stages. Hey, this edition, you're going to lose these data sheets. Next edition, you're going to lose these data sheets. Maybe they could have done that a little bit more eloquently. I do think they probably fumbled the ball there. And this frustrates longtime collectors and hobbyists. And I can completely actually understand that. So the reality is collectors deserve respect. Even if a unit's not meta, it should probably still be legal. And I think they've tried to balance it with like Legends play. But this is going back to the previous conversation that a lot of times players who are playing casually, they want to play competitively. They just don't want to call it competitive. If you don't care about playing competitively and you only want to play casually, you can use your Legends data sheets. But a lot of times they don't want to, and they want to play competitively without calling it competitively. So I think some of that is going to be personality based. But I mean, I do see some issues with this one. So maybe they should be a little bit more eloquent when they retire models. Inconsistent balance tactics. Now, this is the one that I actually am struggling the most with. And I will say Games Workshop is doing a better job of this than they have in the past, but they're still definitely doing it. When armies are too strong and they get nerfed, some armies get so nerfed. They get nerfed so freaking hard. They go from like having a 55% win rate to having a 30% win rate. Orcs being one of them. Sisters of Battle have been nuked from existence this edition. This has happened multiple times this edition, and it was even worse in 9th edition. But then you have some other armies which are just, maybe a little like they're also like horribly overpowered, and there you get like Kid Gloves, Death Guard, Imperial Knights, Chaos Knights. These types of armies are getting like basically just the tiniest little tweaks. Eldar at the beginning of the edition. But they're not getting nuked, but other armies are. So I want to see more consistent types of balance. I actually don't want a perfectly balanced game, and neither do you, most likely. We like the idea that there are always going to be fluctuations in the game. There's always going to be an evolving meta. There's always going to be, I have to discover a counter to this counter. But when Games Workshop balances, they need to balance things a little more consistently. If you're going to hit things with the points nerf, great. You probably don't need to be hitting with a points and a rules nerf, though. If you're going to hit with things with the points and a rule nerf, don't also hit the detachment and the army rule. like, try to keep things a little bit more consistent. If Mordaka felt a little bit too overtuned, maybe Mordaka should have changed from Sustain 2 to Sustain 1. Totally fair, but are you going to hit, but you're hitting it with points, and you're obliterating the army rule, and you're obliterating the strats all at one time? That's a little too much. I'm not saying it didn't deserve to be nerfed. It, of course, did. But things should be nerfed in stages, not all at once. Sisters of Battle didn't need to get like a 20% points nerf, and a huge detachment nerf, and an army rule nerf. That was unreasonable. I'd like to see more balance of this. Yeah, so that's basically all I have to say about that one. All right, and then we have a bonus I'm going to throw in here. The cost of the game. People are really, really up in arms about the cost of the game. As a matter of fact, in October, we're seeing another 4% price hike. Guys, this is very annoying. I agree. I don't like it. But you know what? Warhammer is an expensive hobby, and the way the world is, everything's freaking expensive. And this might not sound very loving, but it is. You kind of got to get over it, man. There's nothing you can do about the price hikes. Unless you can, of course, go play another hobby. And I don't want you to leave the hobby, but like you could go play another hobby. But the reality is, hobbies are freaking expensive. Do any of you guys play golf? because I promise you, Warhammer 40,000 is much cheaper than having golf as your hobby. It's much cheaper than having tennis as your hobby. It's cheaper than having a lot of freaking things as your hobby. I'm not saying it's the cheapest hobby out there. It's certainly not. But man, hobbies are expensive. Sorry. Okay. Game length and slow play. This is the last thing that I saw. Or no, there's one more that people were really complaining about. A lot of times people were complaining about 2,000-point games often running just past time limits. That's an interesting thing that I heard people, and it's like, okay, cool, I can see that. But guys, that's not GW's fault. That's just players not practicing, players not knowing the rules, players stalling when they're losing. That has nothing to do with Games Workshop or the game itself. That's really just players not adapting to a game that innately probably needs to have a time limit. Slow play abuse at tournaments, that was a major issue. Is this probably the wrong word for it? I'm going to say was. So the way that we fixed the slow play at tournaments and stuff was we added in chess clocks, stricter round enforcement. That was a really, really good thing. If you are unable to have all of your rules memorized and get the game done in a certain time frame, then maybe you need to get a little bit more familiar with the rules and the decision-making skills at a lower points format. And luckily, actually, there is a lower points format, which is still a totally viable way to play the game. Personally, I don't recommend playing a lower points format unless you just don't have enough models to play the larger one, if you're trying to get good at the 2,000 point. But if you're not in it for like skill acquisitions and you're just playing for fun, heck yeah, play at 500, play at 1,000. That's totally great. But one of the big solutions for this is realistically, you guys should be playing with freaking chess clocks. And that's kind of a big deal. So basically, play faster, learn your army, stop dragging your feet. GW could like put less models on the table, but that's not happening because they want to sell more models. So there you go. Player discipline is what keeps people from completing games on time. So that's how I feel about that. And then we're going to have the last one, and this is going to be rules, bloat, and confusion. Now, this is one I hear all the time. 10th edition was marketed as being simplified, and rules are now spread across PDFs, data slates, attachments, blah, 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 blah. And guess what? It's still simplified from 9th edition. In 9th edition, you would have to have, like, at certain times, some armies would require 2 white dwarfs and 2 books in order just to play the army. I'm not talking about the game. I'm just talking about just that army. So it actually has been simplified, which is kind of hilarious. And this is something that we're going to see continue to improve in 11th edition and 10th edition, as GW is natively they're just naturally going to have to move towards more of a digital format. Hopefully, and I don't know if this is going to be the case, but hopefully we're going to see all rules in 11th edition go straight to digital. So we're not going to have to worry about having this codex with all of the rules printed in it outdated the second the codex is released. I don't know if this is going to be the case, but hopefully we do get there. Hopefully they have all the rules on the app and they're going to move down to just digital app codes. Guys, I would be very happy to pay $20 just for the rules for a book instead of having to pay $50 for the codex. Actually, as a matter of fact, I pretty much guarantee you more people are going to end up giving GW money if they could just pay $20 for the code. Or if in their Warhammer Plus app, they actually add a subscription rule that would allow people to have access to the digital rules. Maybe you can make the rules of the game free and make the indexes free or whatever, and then when you want to pay do the actual codexes, give people the option to spend $20 for a digital code to add it into the application. Otherwise, people are just going to go use Wahapedia for free. There you go. So I do think that is going to go a long way to continuing to simplify the game and make sure your rules are really consolidated. As far as like balanced data slates and MFMs and stuff, these really are pretty easy. The balanced data slate is always updated. They do actually a really good job with that. You don't need the last 3 balanced data slates. You really only need the last one. You don't need the last 3 rules updates. You only need the 1 MFM. So I do think that's actually done pretty well. The big problem is the way that the codex, the codex and data sheets changes really apply. So yeah, there we go. So hopefully GW continues to improve on that in 11th edition, because it is better in 10th edition than it was in 9th edition, even though it leaves a little room to be desired. Okay, guys. So basically, here's the closing thoughts. These are the 6 issues that what I've seen just from doing polls and talking to people and trolling on Reddit. These are the 6 issues that are really the biggest pain points in Warhammer 40k today. Fixing them is really going to be the key to keeping Warhammer players engaged and happy. Now, I want to know, what frustrates you the most about 40k? Please share it in the comments down below. I actually read all of these. Even if I don't agree with you, I do tend to respond because I like to know what people are thinking. So these are my thoughts on it. And if you agree, great. If you don't, let me know why. And until next time, crap on. Bye-bye.